are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joining with me, as always, is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man, so continuing off of what we were doing we were starting from last episode, we're kind of getting started on some of our off-season coverage, and we started to break down sort of our off-season outlooks or what's next videos for some of the teams that are eliminated from the playoffs or did not make the playoffs. Now, if you haven't checked out last episode, definitely check it out. We did a what's next on the Toronto Raptors and the Utah Jazz. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. And subscribe to the show on, of course, YouTube and all the other platforms as well, where you can find more offseason content coming as the offseason rolls out. But in this episode, we wanted to talk about two teams that are very newsworthy for all the wrong reasons, because both of them were eliminated in the conference semifinals and honestly were both considered disappointments.
Yep.
You know, considering the expectations and where they wanted to be and where their front office has pushed them to be, the fact that they were both eliminated and after the second round is pretty disappointing to say the least. And those two teams are the Philadephia 76ers and the Phoenix Suns. Both teams had good seasons, like relatively good seasons. Both teams had championship aspirations, and both teams fell short. Mind you, in two different ways. You know, I really do feel like the Suns ended their season a little differently than when the Sixers ended their season.
The Sixers had some legitimate and non-legitimate excuses. The Suns, for the most part, didn't have any legitimate excuses.
Yeah, so definitely it's going to be interesting to see what's next for these two teams, because there are a lot of questions heading into the offseason for both of these teams. Starting us off with the Philadelphia 76ers. Well, the Philadelphia 76ers, they had a pretty good season, everything considered. They finished with a 51-31 record, which was the fourth best record in the Eastern Conference, which just shows how competitive the Eastern Conference really was this season. They were good throughout the year. Embiid put up an MVP caliber season. Tyrese Maxey had a breakout year. They went and made their big splash move, traded for James Harden. And the expectation for the Sixers heading into the playoffs is that they were going to be legitimate championship contenders. And we thought this too when the Harden deal kind of was made, this was going to be a good pairing. Like, both these guys are going to help each other. There's going to be less pressure on Harden because now he has a capable big in Embiid, which, to be honest with you, he's never had a big like Embiid in his career. So obviously he had the Dwight Howard, but Dwight Howard is not nearly the player Joel Embiid is. And then same goes for Embiid. He's never had an offensive guard like Harden, who also can get him the ball in different spots and alleviate some pressure off of him. Now, that was in a theoretical sense, of what we expected to happen. And again, Philadelphia, the numbers prove that. They finished 12th in offensive rating, 12th in defensive rating, 9th in net rating. The Sixers were a good team. But ultimately in the playoffs, they lost in the second round to the Miami Heat in 6 games. And honestly speaking, they were given a run for their money by the Toronto Raptors in the first round. Mind you, they looked great in the first couple of games. But after the Raptors started adjusting and figuring them out, it became a lot tougher of a series for the Sixers to eventually close out in 6 games. So the Sixers are definitely in an interesting spot now. They were supposed to be contenders, and now kind of not. Which brings me into some of the notable free agents heading into this offseason. First and foremost, James Harden has a player option worth $47 million. That is a very big contract, especially for a player who, in all honesty, he underperformed. Severely underperformed. And, I guess a lot of people now are seeing the fact that this is not Houston James Harden. We're never going to get that guy again. And, he's never been a playoff performer either. And that's a problem for the Sixers because they've invested so much in trying to get him. Daryl Morey has literally staked his career on making this James Harden move work. The fact that it was pretty disappointing how things ended this season it's very difficult to see how Philly retains him past next season.
Well, here's the thing, couple of things. So James Harden has said he's going to be back next year, which means he's picking up his player option.
Yeah.
So again, it's an untradeable year. Whatever happens next year, then you see afterwards. Because James Harden's obviously going to demand his money. Will the 76ers be willing to pay him depending on how he performs, if he performs anything like he did this year, it's not going to happen. But the thing with James Harden now at this stage of his career, especially if this hamstring issue continues to persist, because I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt to let me see him next year, and if he looks at least physically better, then there's still some leeway there.
Well, here's the thing with his physicality is the fact that at least before, James Harden's never been an athletic player by any stretch of the means, but at least he was able to get by guys, get by slower-footed defenders, and use some craftiness to get to the rim. He can't do that anymore. The step-back jumper is gone, and, at this point, he's no longer getting all the tons of foul calls he used to get with the rule changes, and then he can't blow by guys anymore. So does the hamstring injury attribute to that? Probably, but I don't know if he's ever going to regain that same, at least a similar footing that he used to have.
Well, the one thing about James Harden at this stage of his career and for the Philadelphia 76ers to make this work is that I think Tyrese Maxey has to be that scoring guy, that second option to Joel Embiid. And James Harden is still one of the best playmakers in the league. He hasn't lost that.
Oh yeah, he was great as a playmaker.
He's an amazing passer. So if he takes that role and Tyrese Maxey takes on the scoring role next year, with obviously Tyrese Maxey getting better, then you have a couple of options if you're the 76ers.
Yeah, and we'll get to some of the things the Sixers can do a little later on. But pretty much James Harden, potential free agent, most likely not. He's going to be back next year. The second notable free agent is Danny Green. Now, Danny Green unfortunately suffered an ACL injury. I believe
ACL, LCL.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad knee injury. He suffered, I believe, game 5 or 6 of the Miami series. And to be honest, he's had this next season for his deal is a non-guarantee. I highly doubt it with an ACL or a significant of a knee injury he has that his deal is going to be guaranteed.
Especially because he's up there in age too.
He's up there in age, and also, again, it takes about a year or two to recover off of those type of injuries. So, highly likely that Danny Green won't be on the Sixers next year. Tyrese Maxey has a team option. That is for sure going to be picked up, especially after the season he's had. Matisse Thybulle, team option will be picked up, but there are some questions starting to come up with Matisse Thybulle really needing to develop that offensive game, because there were moments in the playoffs he was just virtually unplayable because of his liability offensively.
Andre Roberson 2.0, basically.
Pretty much, man. Like, he's very bad on the offensive end. DeAndre Jordan's unrestricted free agent. I would not bring him back. If any team gives this man a job next year, fire the front office. Paul Millsap, also an unrestricted free agent. I highly doubt he's coming back to the Sixers because they didn't play him. He wasn't able to do anything.
At this point, I think he should just retire.
He might even consider it, to be honest with you. But, yeah, those were some of the notable free agents on the Sixers, which brings me into some of their needs for the team. And I know a lot of you are going to question this one, but the first thing the Philadelphia 76ers need is a secondary star for Joel Embiid. Does that sound familiar? Right, because that's exactly what they tried to do getting James Harden. But at this point, we said this earlier, James Harden is clearly not the same player they thought they were getting. They thought they were getting a version of the Houston James Harden, who might not have that same athleticism, but still can give you at least 25 points a game, and with the 8 or 9 assists that he can get. It's just not happening for James Harden anymore. And with him making $47 million next season, it's really hard for this Philadelphia team to improve significantly. So, again, will it be a Tyrese Maxey stepping up and taking on that secondary role? Or will there be other moves that they need to make in order to get in another guy who can take on that scoring role that clearly James Harden can't do anymore?
And if this is what James Harden is, I think they don't really have much of a choice except for Tyrese Maxey becomes that secondary scorer, which, based on this season, he is very capable of doing. Well, and if he's able to do that, then we have a decently functioning team, I think.
Well, they have one other option, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, that they can do. But in terms of, they need that secondary scorer for Embiid, and right now Harden just isn't that guy. So getting that is definitely going to be a priority for the Sixers, or getting that sorted out at least will definitely be a priority. The second thing is getting some depth. The Sixers, and I'll give you a lot of credit, Zeeshan, because you called this from the very beginning when the James Harden trade was made, was the fact that trading away Seth Curry and Andre Drummond really hurt the Sixers, especially come playoff time. Like, there were moments in the playoffs, especially against the Raptors, where besides their top 4 guys, they really didn't have anyone else who can give them any level of contribution. Again, when you're talking about Georges Niang, who basically fouled out every game of the playoffs, Matisse Thybulle being virtually unplayable, Shake Milton hit or miss,
I mean, even when it came to Joel Embiid getting injured, you had, instead of Andre Drummond, you had DeAndre Jordan starting for him. Andre Drummond would have been a vastly better option to have in that situation.
And not to mention, again, having the extra shooting of Seth Curry along with Danny Green and then Harden, Maxey. Like, that's another level of depth that the Sixers just did not have and actually missed in this playoff time. So getting some depth, shoring that up, getting some shooters and defenders is clearly going to be a priority for the Sixers team, because this team is really lacking in terms of anyone else besides maybe their top 4 or 5 guys. So depth is for sure going to be a need for them. The third thing I think the Sixers need to do is they need to get some financial flexibility. The Sixers are way over the cap. Like, they are $34 million over the cap and about $7.5 million over the luxury tax. They need to free up some money here, especially when you consider the fact that James Harden's making $47 million next season, and Embiid's making a lot of money, and soon you're going to end up having to pay a Tyrese Maxey and a Matisse Thybulle and some of these other guys that are coming up on their contracts. And then not to mention, if you're going to extend James Harden, how much is that going to cost you? So definitely freeing up some money is going to be I would say a priority for the Sixers. And the best case scenario is I would have to move off Tobias Harris. I think he had a pretty good playoffs. In all honesty,
No, he did, man.
Like, Tobias Harris looked really good in the playoffs. Problem is, he's making around $37 to $38 million for the next 3 seasons. That's a lot of money to be paying him, especially when, again, he's not gonna be that main guy, that secondary guy who the Sixers clearly need. Which is what I was alluding to earlier, where I said, if they can make a Tobias Harris trade work, where they can use his contract to kind of get that secondary scorer, that might work, because the Sixers really have a 1 or 2 year window at this point to still compete.
Well, I mean, they're not really utilizing him to his full potential either in this situation. So it's shown in his struggles over the past couple of seasons how much he's had to adjust with his role on this team. Now, he started to figure out this year in the playoffs, especially with James Harden, feeding him a lot of great assists. But I think, yeah, you mentioned it. I think the one path that you can change this team significantly with is through a Tobias Harris trade.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely making some financial wiggle room is going to be very important for the Sixers. And then finally, the last thing, although it's not going to happen this season, confirmed by Daryl Morey.
Well, not at the beginning, at least.
We don't know yet. It could happen still. But the Sixers definitely need a new coach. Doc Rivers has proven that he's just not a championship caliber coach. He's not a guy who can take a team through a deep playoff run. He's not a guy that can adjust well in the playoffs. And he's clearly not the guy that James Harden really likes and respects either. Now, granted, does James Harden have any right to say that? Probably not, because again, how many teams are you going to keep asking out and finding issues with? But regardless of the fact, Doc Rivers has had a history of choking. He has a history of playoff disappointments and playoff failures. Like, he's lost the most Game 7s out of any coach of all time. Like, that says something about how bad you are as a coach. And I think
he's the 3-1 lead coach.
Yeah, pretty much. What's his record? I think he has a really bad record when it comes to elimination games too.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was exactly, but he has like the worst record in elimination games.
Like, that's why the storylines when the Raptors were won Game 5, and forced that Game 6. People were really concerned that the Philly was gonna end up playing a Game 7, because of the fact that Doc Rivers historically is not a good adjuster. And
I mean, again, not even just the coach, but in terms of his general attitude in Philadelphia as well, he's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. The media especially just really hates him in Philadelphia. And, I mean, for good reason. Like, if you see he's, I think, the only coach who's, besides Frank Vogel, whose press conferences were so, played again and again, right? And that's probably not a good thing if you're a coach. No. And then you talk about him and his relationship with players, throwing players under the bus constantly. Flashback last year to Ben Simmons. Again, I don't disagree with the way you said about Ben Simmons, but that's not what you say about your own player on your own team. That's common sense, right? Yeah. And so things like that are what really pisses off a lot of fans about Glenn Rivers.
Glenn Rivers. But I guess the only silver lining with Doc Rivers' job security is that right now he's Daryl Morey's scapegoat. in the sense that if this James Harden thing next season does not work, even like if things get to a rocky start, Daryl Morey can always just say, okay, Doc Rivers, you're out. Because again, ultimately, Daryl Morey has staked his entire reputation on this James Harden deal, so he's gonna do whatever it takes to make it work. So I would still say until we see signs of that, Doc Rivers' job is pretty much safe. But who really knows at this point? But clearly, the Sixers need a different voice.
They have a Sam Cassell on their bench.
Yeah, but they have Sam Cassell. I would even say, like, again, there's so many different. You need an innovative voice really to come in right now for the Sixers. You need a new way to use Embiid, and try to use this version of Harden. So, again, don't know who that guy is, and I don't know when or if this will happen. But a new coach should definitely be on the radar for the 76ers. Bringing me into the draft, and the theme actually that's been recently for these episodes is that the Sixers have no draft picks in this upcoming draft. They traded away their first round pick to Brooklyn in the infamous Ben Simmons deal, and their second round pick was forfeited to the Miami Heat via a previous trade that has now come to fruition. So pretty much the draft is essentially useless for the Philadelphia 76ers. Bringing me into potential free agent or offseason targets. Now, there's a lot of direction the Sixers can go with this. And like I said, they need primarily shooters, defenders, some wings, and also maybe a backup center to back up Joel Embiid. But the first thing I would say the Sixers should try to do, and they've been in the rumors for this player for a long time, but they should try to trade for Bradley Beal. I think Bradley Beal's time in Washington should come to an end.
We've been saying that for like 5 years.
It has to, man. But okay, he's finally at the point now where he's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, I get what y'all have been saying. I think we can say that much about Bradley Beal. But the Sixers have Tobias Harris's contract. They could realistically make the money work. Now, what sweeteners do they got to throw in to make Washington agree to the deal? Yet to be seen. But it's something the Sixers should definitely try to attempt, for sure. So Bradley Beal should definitely be on their radar. Another guy would be T.J. Warren. Now, T.J. Warren obviously coming off of injury, hasn't played all season. And how great will he be? Yet to be seen. But definitely one of those wing guys who, again, showed in the bubble how good he actually can be as a scorer, especially when, down the stretch. So having him as a depth option wouldn't be a bad idea.
The issue is I don't even know if he's going to play this season.
Yeah, it's still up in the air for T.J. Warren.
And he hasn't played in 2 years, basically.
Yeah, but again, not a bad option if he is going to be available to play. Next guy would be Jeremy Lamb. Now, when you're talking about replacing a guy like Danny Green, who again becomes Danny Red in the playoffs.
He didn't play. He actually played.
I know he actually had a pretty good playoffs, which is really unfortunate how it ended for him. But getting a guy like Jeremy Lamb to replace Danny Green actually makes a ton of sense. He can bring in that shooting that you need. He's a decent defender, and he won't cost you a lot of money either. So Jeremy Lamb's another great option. In terms of a backup options for Joel Embiid, a name that you'll see this name a lot, but Serge Ibaka would be a great fit for the Philadelphia 76ers, mainly because, again, he's a good rim protector. Ideally a good rim protector. And again, he can be serviceable offensively. He's not going to command a ton of money. And I think him and Embiid in the front court would actually be pretty good, a pretty good rotation. If, of course, Ibaka's health remains relatively okay, which, again, so far after that back surgery, things haven't looked the greatest, but hopefully after an off season of rest and recovery, Serge can be back on his feet next season. Another option is Thomas Bryant. Now, Thomas Bryant, and again, this is really if Washington goes in a certain direction, but with the play of Daniel Gafford, it really has made and opened up the opportunity for Thomas Bryant to become expendable, and he is going to be an unrestricted free agent this summer, so maybe if the Sixers can go and make a run at him, they might be able to get him, but again, he's going to be a young player who's, I would assume, going to be pretty sought after. So, but he would be ideal for the Sixers. And then speaking of some of their other needs, they need obviously a backup point guard because now that they start Maxey and James Harden, they don't really have a playmaker off their bench. Some names that I brought up, I thought of was DeLon Wright. DeLon Wright, again, he's not a floor spacer, but he's a solid backup point guard. He can handle the ball, he can play make, he can also defend pretty well, So DeLon Wright, definitely a great option. Another guy would be Patty Mills. Patty Mills would greatly improve their shooting, veteran presence, great leader, great locker room guy. great playmaker, and again, he's a playoff performer for sure. So Patty Mills would be a great option. I'm not sure if he'll leave Brooklyn, but I think he would consider Philadelphia. And then finally, a couple of wing and depth options. Cody Martin would definitely be a good depth guy. I think he would fit Philadelphia, to be honest with you, in terms of like the city and the mindset. So he wouldn't be a bad option. And Otto Porter, who quietly had a pretty solid season with the Golden State Warriors. I don't know if he'll leave the Warriors because, to be honest with you, he's had a pretty good year with them.
I mean, it's a perfect place for him, to be honest.
I know. But again, can the Sixers make a run at him? Maybe. If you give him maybe $7-8 million, he might actually come play for you. But man, overall, the Sixers are in a really tough spot. Embiid isn't getting any younger, and their window to contend, as we mentioned, is basically either 1 or 2 seasons at this point. The East is getting a lot better, and the Sixers need to capitalize on the prime years of Embiid and really capitalize on this roster because, man, the clock is ticking.
Not to mention, Philly fans are not happy, and they're not known for being the most
they boo their team.
Enjoyable fans to their team.
I have never met a more unloyal fan base than the Philadelphia fans. Bro, even when the Raptors were beating them, bro, they were booing and leaving their team early. I'm like, bro, I
mean, I get both perspectives. One is that, bro, you want your team to succeed so bad that you're not willing to put up with failure, which, I mean, I can respect. But then there's also the other side of looking at it, other way of looking at it, where it's just bro, you're leaving while the game is still going on.
You paid to be there.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's definitely interesting, but a lot of questions for the Sixers.
Yeah, and moving on to the other team that was eliminated in this round and that just got eliminated recently, actually, and the most meme-worthy team probably right now, we're talking about the Phoenix Suns.
Shattered our predictions.
Yeah, exactly. They finished 64-18, and they were easily the best team in the league this season. They were, to be honest, even better than last year just because, they have the great system in place. They had good players from top to bottom. They filled out the roster pretty well.
Continuity.
And then, like you said, continuity, right? They had more chemistry this season. It was just a better product than they had last season, just because it gave, because of another offseason. Like Hani mentioned, they were looked at as the favorites to win the title, even by me. They were my preseason prediction. I carried that prediction all throughout the regular season until it got to the playoffs where it kind of looked shaky. But before that, they had the coach of the year in Monty Williams, which was well-deserved.
Well-deserved.
And then both of their stars are going to be on the All-NBA team. Chris Paul is probably going to be second-team All-NBA guard. And
as a 37-year-old.
Yeah, and Booker's probably going to be second or third team as well. So both of their stars will be on the All-NBA teams. They also have the coach of the year. But like I mentioned, my preseason prediction for them to be, the champions after the season was done started to run into problems in the first round when they went up against the New Orleans Pelicans. The New Orleans Pelicans, now granted, I'll give them, credit. They were pretty good. Guys like Jose Alvarado, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, JV, Herb Jones, they all played pretty good, man. They all played, I think, above their standard. Trey Murphy's another guy, Larry Nance. They played a really well-coached game, a really well-coached series. Shout out to Willie Green as well.
We might actually do a what's next for the New Orleans Pelicans but the great thing about them is that they finally took a step and
they have Zion coming
they
back. They
played well. They really, really played well. And considering the fact that there was no sort of direction for the Pelicans team before the season, now you can kind of see where they're heading and where they're heading. So again, credit to the Pelicans. They played pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. Credit to the Pelicans. But the fact that the Phoenix Suns had such a fight against them and that they needed to go 6 games and basically a historically perfect game by Chris Paul in that game 6.
Well, the Pelicans were a 10th seed. Think about it this way. They came from the play-in. They won both the play-in games to be where they are. To make it to the 8th seed. So the fact that the Suns, the number 1 seeded Suns, 64 wins, struggled and went to 6 games against this team was pretty concerning, especially in the first round.
Yeah, exactly. It was concerning in the first round, but then you get to the second round. Now, the first 2 games go pretty well for the Phoenix Suns. And then you go on from there. And there's a lot of other videos that you can see detailing how the Suns broke down. But, their season culminated in an epic meltdown against Dallas, especially in that game 6. Game 7, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, game 7.
Game 7, where they literally got 40-pieced on their home court in a game 7, with all of their starters shooting basically under like 30%.
And it was really just Luka Doncic asserting his will and dominance on the Phoenix Suns. Like, Devin Booker could not do anything against what Luka Doncic was doing.
Well, not even that. Dallas played very well as a collective. Their defense was absolutely amazing.
They surprised us.
I will shout out Jason Kidd because I crapped on the hire of Jason Kidd all season long. I gotta eat my words. He was a really good hire for the Dallas Mavericks.
Well,
apparently.
this is year 1.
Okay,
let's just preface that this is the first year.
Even if this is only 1 year of what you're getting from Jason Kidd, it's vastly better than what they've gone for the past 12 years from the Dallas
they're
Mavericks.
in the conference finals for the first time since 2011.
They're out of the first round for the first time.
Since 2011.
Exactly.
Since the last time Jason Kidd was on the team.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Phoenix Suns, I'm not going to talk about it too much anymore, but they had a terrible, terrible end to the season. And again, like I was talking about memeability, this was very memeable just because of the fact that a lot of people started to really dislike Devin Booker and his attitude this season. CP3 has unfortunately earned the nickname now on social media of CPO because this was probably his best chance to win a ring, or his last chance to win a ring. And then now you have the DeAndre Ayton situation, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. Speaking of DeAndre Ayton, he's one of their notable free agents. He's currently a restricted free agent, and he will be highly sought after. JaVale McGee is an unrestricted free agent, great backup big. We've talked about him numerous times on previous episodes. Basically, every team in the league would love to have JaVale McGee on their team.
Listen, he's a 3-time champ, and he knows his role, and he's been there, done that.
He knows what he's doing on the court, and he's a great locker room guy, right? Mm-hmm. Even like we look at like the Lakers, for example, how much they missed him in the locker room. You could clearly see it on the court. Yeah. Cam Johnson's on a team option. Obviously, that's getting picked up.
Guaranteed pickup.
Then you have Ishmael Wainwright and Aaron Holiday on qualifying offers. Now, who knows what's going to happen? I don't think Ishmael Wainwright's going to get picked up.
They might do
Aaron Holiday. We'll see. He had some decent moments for the Phoenix Suns. And then you have another couple of unrestricted free agents in Alfred Payton and Bismack Biyombo, who I think are both probably not on this team next season.
Biyombo maybe, and that all depends on what really happens with McGee. So like
with Ayton.
Yeah, and with DeAndre Ayton. So, again, Biyombo might be back next season, but Alfred Payton, no.
And then moving on to the team needs, like I talked about, their biggest priority this offseason and the biggest piece of news surrounding the Phoenix Suns is their situation with DeAndre Ayton. Now, they ideally should re-sign DeAndre Ayton, but it will be expensive. They're currently $10.5 million over the cap. They are still $16.5 million under the luxury tax, which is somehow that's pretty crazy actually. But DeAndre Ayton will be expected to command a max contract.
And they have rights on DeAndre Ayton, so they can go over the cap to re-sign him.
Exactly. And they can offer him that extra year. So theoretically, they could offer him a bigger contract. But other teams like OKC, Indiana, Houston, there's a billion other teams out there that can offer him max level money, which the Phoenix Suns may not be willing to match. And that's a big problem in terms of the Phoenix Suns championship window. And then there's also the fact that, all the issues between DeAndre Ayton and the Phoenix Suns, which culminated in him apparently not checking back into the game for Game 7.
Monty Williams was apparently frustrated with DeAndre Ayton, and he basically benched him. And was it the right decision? Was it, a petty reason to bench one of your better guys? Who knows? But I really think, again, he feels like he's not getting a big enough role. And I can see where that conversation can kind of begin. But at the same time, I think he has a bit of a skewed impression of what today's big man actually is.
I mean, here's the thing, right? DeAndre Ayton's a good big man. But is he a max level big man?
Like, are you an Embiid? Are you a Jokic? Are you in that class? And I think you're not. I think you're in the class with the Rudy Goberts, the good big men.
I don't even know about that. Rudy Gobert, at least, Rudy Gobert has a calling card. He's an established All-Star. He's an established All-NBA player. DeAndre Ayton isn't even that. Now, again, granted, betting on himself, he could become that. But he hasn't shown me anything so far that says he's gonna be one of those like top 3, top 4 centers in the league.
He does not have that assertiveness, and I think I don't know who, but I think it was Patrick Beverley actually who recently went on his media tour. Whoever thought of putting
Shout out to my favorite player, Patrick Beverley.
Whoever thought it was a great idea to put Patrick Beverley on TV with no filter, you're either getting erased or you're getting fired. Like, I really
Basically.
don't know. But pretty much what he said was that, listen, if he's complaining about not getting touches, well, what does Shaq always say? Get it off the rim, big fella. Like, listen, you're 7 foot tall. You're the best guy to get it off the rim. If you're complaining that, Devin Booker or CP3 aren't giving me the ball, you got to go up and get it. So I agree with Patrick Beverley on that standpoint where, listen, he isn't as really he's not assertive as a Joel Embiid.
I was going to say he's notoriously known as one of the softer big men in the league.
Yeah.
Right? So, again.
I mean, his rookie, there's a video of him freaking dancing with Mo Bamba. Like,
the issues with DeAndre Ayton on the court and then off the court between him and the Phoenix Suns there's a huge possibility that he could be gone from this team. Now, if Phoenix does not overpay and DeAndre Ayton leaves, they're not going to be stuck with that DeAndre Ayton money if he doesn't end up deserving that money. However, we can probably say the championship window is closed. Despite the fact that DeAndre Ayton is not the guy that I think he thinks he is, or he hasn't shown me that he's an all-NBA type of guy yet, the fact remains that without him, this Phoenix team does not work. It does not work. No. He does a lot of little things for this Phoenix team, and he's one of the main engines that makes this Phoenix team run.
He's a great pairing with Chris Paul, and I think, again, he would admit that for himself as well, that Chris Paul made him a better player. But like you said, it all really depends on if he stays, and then also what James Jones would do in this situation that he doesn't stay.
Exactly, and so in that case, if he does not stay, you're going to need a backup plan for DeAndre Ayton. So the question is, do you stick with having role-playing centers like a JaVale McGee and try to plug your team that way and still make that championship run? Or do you try to go for a DeAndre Ayton replacement, try to get another big name in the center position, like, for example, trading for Christian Wood or Miles Turner or somebody like that?
Yeah, they can trade for Miles Turner.
So you're going to have to figure out what you got to do. In terms of their actual roster construction minus DeAndre Ayton, like I mentioned previously, this is literally the best team in the league. They have the best roster construction in the league. They have the deepest team from top to bottom. So there's not really much you can say in terms of making the roster construction better. 2 stats, though, I will say, just as, needs improvement parts for this Phoenix team, just for them to get better. Number 1 is outside shooting, and number 2 is slashing. They got to get more outside shooting, whether it's forcing their players to shoot more threes or, getting other shooters.
Get rid of Landry Shamet. Why are you paying this man $46 million?
Shout out to his agent, man.
To brick every... I saw him live in person, and I'm literally like, this guy's making $14 million, and we still have the same amount of points right now. Like, I cannot stand that.
Outside shooting is a problem, and slashing is a problem. Getting to the rim. They're 26th in 3-point attempts and 21st in 3-point makes. And they're 27th in free throw attempts and 24th in free throw makes. Now, the outside shooting and slashing, those issues are kind of paired together because of the fact that their players notoriously are mid-range players. Chris Paul, Devin Booker love to operate in the mid-range. And that's well and good. But if you're bottom 5 in 3-point attempted and free throws attempted in today's league, that's kind of an issue. Now, again, like I said, this team was still built to win a championship and could have really won a championship. But in terms of those stats in particular, it's not great. And that's one of the main reasons that Dallas's defense was actually so good against the Phoenix Suns, making Devin Booker get to that elbow spot, but then crowding him. His playmaking wasn't there. He wasn't able to pass the ball. CP3 couldn't really move like he once did. And so you crowd him around the mid-range as well. And then you make the other role players try to beat you. You put DeAndre Ayton in the high post and try to make him beat you.
And that's the problem that I'm noticing with what you're bringing up. Chris Paul and Devin Booker, your mid-range players. Well, what do your other guys do? Well, Mikal Bridges, he's going to be shooting the corner three. Cam Johnson shooting the three. DeAndre Ayton's not shooting the three. And when you're talking about slashing, well, because Mikal and Cam are shooting threes, they're not getting to the line. They're not going inside unless they're getting chased off the line, which, again, doesn't happen as often as you think. And then off the bench, I mean, again, who's really shooting threes? Cam Payne will try to get to the rim. He's not going to shoot first. Jay Crowder, hit or miss. Like, it really comes down to getting those guys more willing to take on, those bigger roles and take on those bigger opportunities.
I mean, even when you're talking about Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, them staying in the corners on the wings to shoot threes, you have to be able to collapse the defense to get those open three-point shots. And the Phoenix Suns just don't do that enough, particularly Chris Paul, who's older at this stage of his career.
He can't do it as he
And
used to.
Devin Booker, who's never really been a great attacking the rim kind of guy. He's had struggles with finishing the ball and finishing through contact as well. So
I think Booker deserves a lot more blame in this series loss because of the fact that how bad he was in the last few games of the series, especially the game 7.
Especially when he was talking all that smack.
Yeah, like, listen, man. That's the thing. They're talking about levels of players, like tiers. You're not on Luka's level. Like, you're a tier or two below where Luka Doncic is. And Luka's done it in less time. So,
and again, the funny thing about it is, remember that video about with Devin Booker, like saying in the pickup game, yo, I don't want you guys double teaming me or whatever it was. And the funny thing was, the main thing that screwed him over this season was the fact that the Dallas Mavericks double teamed him and he didn't know what to do after that.
His playmaking and defense needs to definitely improve next season.
And then speaking of Chris Paul, you have to start preparing for life after Chris Paul. He's currently 37 right now. He clearly is not the same player he once was. For one, Charles Barkley made a great point about him not being able to play back-to-back good games, like 2 games in a row, where he actually plays good.
Yeah.
And he hasn't really done that. So, that's an issue. And then he's making $30 million for the next 3 years. So how tradable is that contract if Chris Paul just falls off a cliff? We won't know. But the point is James Jones has to start prepping for life after Chris Paul. In terms of the draft, like Hani mentioned, both these teams don't have any draft picks this year. And then speaking of free agents or offseason targets, number one, bringing back JaVale McGee, whether or not DeAndre Ayton stays. JaVale McGee is one of the better backup bigs in the league. Bismack Biyombo also had some good moments for the Phoenix Suns this season. He might get a bigger offer from somebody else, but he's still relatively affordable for the Phoenix Suns if they want to bring him back. They also have, the issue of Dario Saric, who's also on the roster, and he's going to be coming back this year, hopefully. So, Bismack Biyombo, maybe not an option. However, another option, like I mentioned, with DeAndre Ayton staying, or perhaps if he leaves, Serge Ibaka, a cheap depth piece at this stage of his career. Ed Davis is also another one of those guys. And then talking about guards who can, potentially space the floor, try to make attacking plays off the dribble, and also back up Chris Paul and Devin Booker. We have Patty Mills, who's currently on player option, so he might decline that if he wants to get out of Brooklyn, and Austin Rivers.
Patty Mills, the problem with Patty Mills is that, again, now you're having 2 older point guards in him and Chris Paul. And again, you kind of have Cam Payne, who has been good as your backup. He has not been bad by any stretch of the means, but maybe getting that extra level of playmaking might be a way to look at it. But I would more so look at an Austin Rivers. I think he would be great in terms of a defensive fit, especially through his stint from Denver. And I think he has that scoring capability that can be more of a compliment to a guy like what's his name? Campaign?
Cameron Payne?
Yeah, Campaign, yes. I don't know why I blanked out there for a second. But yes, he'd be a great compliment with Campaign in the backcourt off the bench. So I would go after an Austin Rivers, but I wouldn't complain for Patty Mills.
Yeah, and then speaking of some trade targets, if DeAndre Ayton leaves, like I mentioned before, Christian Wood and Miles Turner, both are available and attainable, I think, if you're the Phoenix Suns.
Miles Turner would actually be an interesting fit on this Phoenix team. The only thing is interior strength. I don't know how much Miles Turner has over a guy like DeAndre Ayton. Because DeAndre Ayton can battle with a lot bigger bodies than Miles Turner can. But in terms of the floor spacing, the lob threat, I guess, and the rim protection, I guess Miles Turner has you beat there. And Miles Turner would probably be better on the perimeter.
Well, I mean, either way, it would be a replacement option for if DA leaves, obviously.
Yeah,
So
for sure. So that's what's next for the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers. Let us know what you guys think, either on the comment section on YouTube or on social media. What's next for the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers? What would you do to improve these teams? Let us know in the comment section or on social media. Bringing us finally into the Up and Under segment for this week. And a pretty newsworthy week, to be honest with you, all things considered. But basically, first and foremost, are you up or under on the NBA considering a new transition take foul rule? Basically, if you are fouled within transition, the NBA, you would be awarded one free throw to the foul team, and you would also receive ball. And what we're talking about is that if someone's on a fast break and they get intentionally fouled, even though they have a clear pass to the rim, that will now result in a free throw and ball for that team. So are you up or under on this consideration?
I'm up on it. It's a good rule, man. Like it, I understand the hesitancy to implement it, but where we've gone in the past couple of years with the take foul, it's really watered down that aspect of the game. Particularly when the NBA wants to make offense more exciting, more high paced, more fast break option, more fast break action, lobs, whatever you want. The take foul really kills that part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now again, it's kind of going to be bad for the defense, but at the same time, don't turn over the ball.
Yeah,
right.
It will really make defenses think more about taking that intentional foul or really, doing that.
Or
it's either
hustle back.
Exactly. But yeah, I'm with you. I like it as well.
Yeah, next up, are you up or under on how this year's NBA lottery turned out? So the top 5 picks were Orlando has the first pick, Oklahoma City Thunder has the second pick, the third pick goes to the Houston Rockets, fourth pick, actually Sacramento Kings, they moved up quite a bit from projections, and fifth pick will be owned by the Detroit Pistons. So how do you feel about this year's NBA draft lottery in general?
I'm up on it in terms of obviously the lottery and stuff and the teams that were involved in it. I'm happy with the Orlando Magic they had a pretty horrible season, but getting the number 1 overall pick definitely be great for them.
They have an exciting team now.
They do. And Oklahoma City I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do because, again, seeing the pieces that they got going on with SGA, Lou Dort, Josh Giddey.
And a million picks.
And 17 first-round picks in the next 5 drafts, Sam Presti is scouting them kids. But, it really, it's a pretty interesting to see the draft lottery kind of shape up and bring up some different teams. Now, obviously, my investment in the draft lottery has significantly dropped from last year because we clutched out and we ended up with the Rookie of the Year. But there are definitely some good players in the top of this draft. Obviously, Chet Holmgren is the one that everyone's talking about, Jabari Smith, and then obviously Paolo Banchero. 3 good guys. Any one of these teams, even Houston. Houston would be interesting too, getting another guy to pair with Jalen Green. Sacramento, purgatory.
Have fun, Sacramento.
Purgatory. Detroit getting...
you seen apparently Vivek Ranadive put his daughter as the assistant GM for the Sacramento Kings G League team. Fun times.
Yo, just bring back Vlade Divac, yo. At this point. But Detroit getting the 5th pick, I'm actually really happy for the Pistons as well, getting that 5th pick.
As long as they stop beating us every single game.
Yeah. But again, they got Cade last year, so they're pretty much they're okay right now. But yeah, I'm pretty much up on the draft lottery for the most part.
Next up, are you up or under on Kyrie Irving saying that he felt the Cavaliers with him and LeBron could have won more championships if he was as mature as he is now?
Under. You realize this now? Hindsight is always 20/20. And we all could have said you leaving LeBron is a mistake because you're not going to win as much without him. And we were all right. Since leaving LeBron, what did you do? Boston flame out in the conference finals.
Well, he didn't even play.
Didn't even play.
Conference finals. He followed that up with the spectacular failure in Boston that one season.
Yeah, pretty much. And then ditching them, dragging KD to Brooklyn. And
basically not playing.
Yeah, basically not playing, for the most part. And now, again, there's concerns on whether or not he might retire. There's concerns on how committed he is to basketball.
The interesting thing is that he says if he was as mature as he is right now. That's the funny thing to me because
how mature
there's
are you?
a lot of questions about his current maturity.
Like, you disappear for a random period of time without telling the team because you need a mental break. Like, dude, you're in a job. At the end of the day, even though you're playing basketball, they're paying you to do this. Like, have at least some respect for your job and your workplace and the people you work for. Like, dude, like Kyrie Irving, I would not give Kyrie Irving a long-term deal ever again.
I mean, speaking of long-term deals, it's reported that Nike is unlikely to extend Kyrie Irving's signature shoe deal. So are you up or under on that?
I'm under because I like Kyrie's shoes. I think Kyrie's shoes are really good and really creative and great for Nike's brand.
Well, the key thing is his signature shoe deal is what it says. So reportedly, I think they'll still have Kyrie's shoes. And maybe he'll still be on Nike, but they just won't make any more of his signature shoes.
Yeah, basically. But again, the signature shoes are some of the more popular shoes out there. Like, again, we both own Kyrie's.
He has the best shoes, I think.
He has some of the best shoes on the market. And his creativity, his input, he's very involved in the process for some of his shoes. And the fact that his antics and his issues have created this negative stigma where now it's hard for companies and teams to trust him, I think it's really going to hurt his career. Now, he might be okay with it, but it's a really, really tough look, especially considering the caliber of player Kyrie Irving actually is. Like, he's a great player, but this stance and whatever he's doing really hurting his career for the most part. But with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and of course YouTube. Definitely subscribe to the show so you never miss a great episode. More off-season content will be on the way. Also follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at UpLetterN_podcast, Facebook.com/UpAndUnderPodcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news as they occur. Definitely check that out if you haven't done so. Also, check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we write blog posts with every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen or watch the full thing, you can read about it all in one spot. So we have every episode. We'll have the video, the audio, and the written up version all in one place. So you guys can check that out at your convenience. And yeah, man, we are now in the conference finals. Very exciting. Obviously, the matchups aren't really particularly to our liking.
I mean, but it's been a good playoffs, though. In terms of, like, bro, it's much better than... Remember the Cleveland Golden State days where you had the same finals, like, every single year?
Yeah. We're guaranteed a different finals because the Bucks lost. So now we're guaranteed a new champion this year. So that's always exciting. But nevertheless, I was telling Zeeshan this earlier, but, like, I regret not watching the Heat Celtics game because I watched the highlights of that game. And I'm like, that's a really exciting game.
I mean, they had a bunch... That was probably the most... block party game I've ever seen.
Yo, man, Bam Adebayo blocked the shit out of... I think it was Jaylen Brown. That was a nice block. Like
they had like 25 blocks that game. It was pretty insane.
It's gonna be I think it's gonna be a pretty fun series, and even the Western Conference series as well, to see can Luka handle carrying his team to an NBA Finals.
Based on what Dallas did against Phoenix, I think it'll be more interesting than I initially thought it would be.
I'm hoping it will be interesting. Like, I just don't want to see Golden State get an easy pass to the NBA Finals, and I really don't want to see Golden State in the NBA Finals. But I want to see something interesting. So we'll see what happens. Definitely going to be an interesting time. But yeah, man, the season is slowly wrapping up. But we'll keep you guys updated. Again, more off-season content on the way. But with that concludes this week's episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.